Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another Into Suffolk Wednesday webinar. Today's topic is living on campus. So this is a great presentation designed for students that will be living in the Suffolk University resident halls, which we call on-campus living. If you are living off campus in an apartment or house or homestay, this presentation is not for you, so you do not need to watch it. So once again, welcome. I am glad that you are here. So today we'll be going through a lot of really important updates for that on-campus experience. The first, of course, is some general Into Suffolk reminders as you prepare for your travel into Boston and as you prepare to begin classes this fall. I'll also be making sure to spend some time describing the on-campus experience, specifically airport transfers, what the resident hall experience is like, what the dining plan is, what to pack. That's always a big question that we get. And of course, at the very end, we'll have time for questions and answers. I realize I never introduced myself. So hello, my name is Sophie Wilson. I serve as the Director of Student Experience here at Into Suffolk. And my team and I actually help manage the entire student experience, including but not limited to living on campus, dining on and off campus, airport pickup, orientation, trips and activities, jobs, health insurance, and more. So what that means is that if any of those topics you're thinking, gosh, I might have a question about that, I'll provide our email address at the end of the presentation. So please send us an email. We're always happy to connect over a Zoom call, over the phone, or over email. So let's begin. So the first part of our presentation is some very important reminders for students that will be starting classes this fall. Once again, I will be sharing this presentation today, so you do not have to take notes. You'll be getting a copy of it later this afternoon. The first reminder is that we still have 2 more webinars scheduled this summer. Thank you for attending today's Living on Campus presentation. I highly recommend that you attend next Wednesday's presentation, which is called Preparing Your Move to Boston. This will be extremely beneficial, especially if you've never traveled to the US, if you've never moved to an on-campus resident hall, if you've never been to Boston, or if you just want some really good tips about what the preparation and move will look like. So we'll be discussing everything from packing lists, to banking and cell phone resources, to grocery stores, to neighborhoods. And we'll also have a student with us during that presentation to answer student-to-student questions. Our final Wednesday webinar presentation will actually be what we call Q&A, which stands for question and answer session. So on August 25th, you'll be able to see me, my team, a current Suffolk student, and your academic advisor. We'll be here if you have questions about your class schedule, what to expect during orientation, and even if you have questions that you want to ask another student. So our last Wednesday webinar presentation on August 25th is our Into Suffolk drop-in question and answer. So come with any questions you have, or even if you just want to say hello. Some other important reminders include orientation. So I know that you have gotten so many emails from my team. In fact, I know we send them every Thursday. And those emails include important reminders about Into Suffolk orientation. All new Suffolk students, including Into Suffolk students, are required to attend orientation. And orientation is a time, it's a few days, where we will review all the resources and expectations and services that Suffolk University has and offers its students. If you are an online student, meaning you are not able to come to Boston, you will be able to participate in our online orientation. The majority of our new students this fall will actually be in person. So you'll be coming to campus, you'll actually be going to the Into Center where I am right now, and you'll be able to meet your classmates virtually and in person during orientation. As a reminder, orientation has two separate parts. We have our online orientation course, which I'll show you what that looks like later in today's presentation. It is very important that you go through that online course by August 30th. And then we have our in-person, what we call our live sessions or synchronous sessions. And that starts Tuesday, August 31st and ends Friday, September 3rd. However, we still have social activities happening that entire weekend, including a boat trip in downtown Boston, bowling, a cookout, and more. So even though orientation sessions will end on Friday, September 3rd, we'll have so many activities happening that entire weekend that you can still participate in. You will be getting a lot more email reminders from my team regarding orientation, including a copy of the orientation schedule later this month. Another reminder I have is that we do have current Suffolk students, including those in the Into Suffolk program, who are just waiting to connect with you. So if you'd like to talk with a current student, whether maybe it's a student in your same major or program, or a student from your same country, you can find them through our TAP Ambassador program. I've included the link here. Of course, I'll make sure to send it out in my follow-up email. But these are students who are able to speak with you. When I say speak, type online and answer questions you might have from a student perspective. They're very excited to welcome you, and you'll actually see a lot of them because they will be serving as our Into Suffolk orientation volunteers later this August. I mentioned earlier that we have that Into Suffolk online orientation, and this is actually part of what we call our Into Suffolk student website. Our student website is an amazing, amazing resource because it includes everything from airport arrivals to how to check your class schedule to how to order textbooks and more. This website, you will have access, you meaning all Into Suffolk students, will have access to this site automatically. You should have received an email from us that includes a link of how to log in. You'll have to use your Suffolk University credentials, so the same username and password that you would use for your email. And we actually will be posting regular updates to this website throughout the academic year. So as you can see, there's a section for announcements. All of our student events are also posted here. And it's also a place where you can find contact information for Into Suffolk staff. So I highly recommend, if you have not done so already, to go explore our Into Suffolk student website. Under the Student Experience tab on the website, you'll find a lot of information regarding orientation. So that online orientation course is going through all of those pages on the website and making sure that you feel prepared to begin orientation on Tuesday, August 31st. Another reminder that I have, which is very important, has to do with immunization and health records. So we are located in the city of Boston in the beautiful state of Massachusetts. And the state of Massachusetts has a law that requires all university students to provide immunizations and health records. So please make sure that you have uploaded your immunization health records to the Suffolk Student Health Portal before classes begin. If you have questions about what is the health portal, I'm not sure if my immunization records are complete, or maybe I'm missing a vaccine or shot, do not worry. We will have an immunization clinic during orientation, where you'll be able to come to campus and actually meet with the Suffolk University nurse practitioner who can make sure that your records are complete. And if you are missing a shot, you'll be able to get that shot on campus during that clinic. The cost of shots for students is free, so you do not have to pay any additional funds to get those required vaccinations on campus. As a reminder, if you have not uploaded your immunization records, the records must be in English. So if they are in your native language that is not English, please make sure that you get those documents translated before you upload them to the health portal. And speaking of health requirements, I've been reminding students regularly, but we want to make sure that all students, faculty, and staff at Suffolk University are practicing health best practices, which includes getting the COVID-19 vaccine. So everyone at our university is required to be vaccinated against COVID-19, and the vaccination deadline is August 16th. If you are not able to meet this vaccination deadline of next Monday, please contact me, and I'll once again provide my email address at the end of today's presentation, and we'll be able to work out a new timeline for you to get that vaccination. If you are in your home country and you're not able to get access to a COVID-19 vaccine, do not worry, you will be able to get vaccinated upon your arrival to the US. Okay, so I know I just completed a lot of very important Into Suffolk reminders, but I know that you are here today because you are curious about the on-campus living experience. So the next portion of my presentation is going to be focusing on, once again, students living on campus in our Suffolk resident halls. So first of all, I just want to remind folks, you will get an email with detailed arrival and move-in instructions later this month. What that means is that you will get an email that's specific to you and your housing assignment and which resident hall you're living in the next 2 weeks. So the information I'll be presenting today is very general, but you will get information about what room you'll be living in, what building you'll be in, and roommate information sent to your Suffolk email. So just check your email daily for those updates. Okay, so the first part of your journey of living on campus is getting into Boston. If you have not done so, you must submit your airport arrival details as soon as possible. Airport arrival details means that we need to know your flight information. So what flight you'll be coming in on, the flight number, so the airlines, the flight number, and the time of arrival. And because you're living on campus, you will have access to our free airport pickup service. This means that there'll be a taxi waiting for you when you arrive in the Boston Logan Airport, and that taxi will take you from the airport directly to your resident hall. It's very important for us that we are able to book this taxi for you in a timely manner. So what that means is that you need to submit your airport arrival details at least 72 hours in advance. We cannot guarantee an airport pickup if you submit your arrival details without the 72 hours of preparation time. So please, if you have not done so already, submit your airport arrival information through our airport arrival survey. Okay, so our next slide really provides more information about the resident halls on campus. So this date you're going to see in all of your emails, but as a reminder, the move-in date for on-campus students is Monday, August 30th. So that is the day that you'll be moving into your dormitory. And so what that means is that if you arrive into Boston before August 30th, you will not be able to move into your room. We recommend that students who arrive earlier book a local hotel, and we'll provide information about where to find local hotels. At the end of the presentation, you can also find it on our Into Suffolk student website. But as a reminder, you cannot move in until Monday, August 30th. And the reason why is that our university will actually be deep cleaning all of the rooms in the resident halls. And so the rooms will not be able to accommodate people because they'll be cleaned during that time. As a reminder for all of our on-campus students, you will have a roommate of the same gender. So you will have hopefully a brand new friend that you will get to meet. And most of our students will be living in a double room, meaning 2 people in 1 room with access to a shared or suite style bathroom. Some rooms may also have a private bathroom, so 2 people for 1 bathroom. It will depend on the resident hall that you'll be living in. And once again, you'll get detailed information about which building you'll be living in sent to your student email later this month. Just as a reminder for students, Into Suffolk move-in is earlier than the general Suffolk University move-in. What that means is that you'll be arriving into your room before a lot of the other on-campus students. So you may not meet your roommate until early September. Some other reminders about the resident halls include some of their amazing benefits. So when you move into your resident hall, you'll notice that there's actually going to be 24/7, meaning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including holidays, staff live-in support. So there'll be what's called resident assistants or RAs, which are live-in student staff members. And they'll actually meet you, they'll say hello, and they are a great resource for you if you have questions about anything related to the university. They'll also be organizing social events in the buildings. And they're also someone you can go to if you get locked out of your room, or if someone's being loud on the floor, or if you're not even sure how to use the laundry in the building. So please make sure that you get to know your resident assistant. Every building also has a professional full-time staff member who is not a student, who also lives in the building. And so they're also there to support your experience and answer questions that you have. And you'll actually get to meet your resident assistants and that professional staff member who's called a resident director during orientation. We'll have a dinner where you get to meet them. And then there'll also be a floor meeting where you'll get to meet all the people that are living on your floor and those 24/7 staff members. All resident halls also come with study and social spaces. So let's say it's winter in Boston, it's January, it's so cold, it's -10 degrees Celsius, and you're thinking, I don't want to go to the library today. It's so cold outside, I just want to stay inside, but I need to study for a class. You will be able to access those study spaces in your building. You don't even have to go outside. There's also social spaces that include access to TVs, video games, board games, and more. And it's a great location where you can meet other Suffolk students as well. So I encourage you, even though you're living on campus, you'll have an amazing room. The picture that you're seeing here is actually one of our resident hall rooms at 1 Court Street. I do encourage you to get out of your room and use those communal, social, and study spaces. I mentioned earlier, but one of the other benefits of living on campus is there are specific free events just for on-campus students. And this could be everything from getting burgers and milkshakes at one of the local restaurants close to your resident hall with other on-campus students to movie nights. And you'll be getting a lot of information about those events after you move in through emails, the bulletin boards, and flyers. And often your resident assistant will knock on your door and invite you to attend those free events. I also want to add that every on-campus resident hall also has a security desk on the first floor. What that means is that only students that live in that building or live in other on-campus resident halls will be able to access the building itself. So if you are going to be traveling with friends or family, they will need to get visitor access to see your room. And that's just because we want to make sure that only the right people are allowed into our buildings. There's also a mail service. So if you're someone like me where I get a lot of mail, you will be able to check your mailbox pretty easily as an on-campus student. I get this question often, which is, what furniture exists? Are there certain things I need to buy when I arrive into Boston? And so I did want to share that all of our resident hall rooms are fully furnished. Fully furnished means that they come with a twin bed. Often it's an extra long mattress. So if you're someone who's very tall, you will have enough room to fit on your bed. And then every room also comes with a desk chair, closet, and blinds. You can see in this picture on this slide that these students also bought a lamp, a mirror, a chair, and a footstool. So you will be able to purchase other furniture if you'd like for your room after you arrive. And my final benefit of living on campus, which is one of my favorite things, is that you are actually going to be living in the middle of downtown Boston. And that is something that is so much fun because you're going to be in the heart of the city with easy walking distance access to restaurants, grocery stores, free events, the Boston Commons, the Freedom Trail, to campus, and more. So please take advantage of your location and explore your new city when you arrive. I also wanted to spend some time during today's presentation to talk about the dining plan. So as an on-campus student, you actually have what's called a dining plan. And this means that you have a set amount of money that you get to spend however you see fit on food while you're living on campus. The dining plan is actually built into your student ID card. So you'll be getting your student ID card during orientation, and your dining plan is similar to a debit card, will actually be added automatically to your ID card itself. So there's no separate card that you need to carry. Your dining plan will be what's called a meal plan C. That means that you will have $1,458 US to spend each semester on meals. You can always add more funds to your dining plan at any time. We have some students that have money left over, and we have some students that use it up very quickly. It just depends on what you like to eat and how often you eat on campus. You are not required to eat on campus. A lot of our students love eating at the local downtown restaurants. So you can go off campus and eat, but just know that you do have money on your student ID card that you can use at any of our 6 restaurants on campus. If you're someone with some dietary restrictions, meaning there's certain foods that you shouldn't eat or that you really don't like to eat, Suffolk University has a campus nutritionist. This is someone who specializes in food and diet, and they're able to meet with you to help put together a meal plan about which dining options in our restaurants are the best fit for your needs. And it's free to meet with them. At all of our 6 restaurants, we do offer quite a variety of food choices. So everything from the very American burgers and fries to also global menus as well. So all of our menus are posted on our Suffolk University dining website every single day. A link to that website is actually included in this presentation. And so for students, if you were like me, where you're thinking, I don't know what I'm craving today, but I love looking at a menu and then making my decision, you can do that from your on-campus room, figure out where you want to eat, what's being served that day, go to that restaurant, use your dining card, and then go to class. Our dining options, those restaurants are open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so please make sure that you use your meal card. The meal card itself rolls over while you're living on campus. Rolling over means if you're, let's say you have money left over at the end of fall semester and you're still on campus during spring semester, that money will roll over or continue while you're living on campus during the spring. But please make sure that you use up all of your meal plan before you finish living on campus. So use up your money, enjoy eating on campus. It's delicious, it's so convenient. And a lot of our restaurants are actually located in the same buildings as your classes. And those restaurants do include coffee too. So don't worry, you'll get your caffeine. Part of today's presentation includes some information about what to pack. So we talked earlier about what comes inside your resident hall room that was fully furnished. But I sometimes get questions from students about, do I need to pack this sort of clothing? Or do I need to pack these electronics? Or can I buy this item in Boston? We'll talk a lot more about what to pack during next week's webinar, but I wanted to share a few recommendations today. So when it comes to what to pack, I first like to remind myself of what the climate is like here in Boston. So Boston has 4 distinct seasons. What that means is that the temperature fluctuates from as low as -10 degrees Celsius to highs in the summer of 26 degrees Celsius. Today is actually a pretty hot day. What that means as you think about what to pack is that you will need everything from short sleeve shirts to heavy jackets and hats. There is shopping in Boston. What that means is that you do not have to pack your entire wardrobe with you to Suffolk unless you'd like to. So I would actually recommend that you pack clothing for the first few months, just that you have enough for the season that you'll be experiencing when you move here. Because you're living on campus, you'll be within, I kid you not, 10 minutes walking to so many clothing stores. There's a very famous street called Winter Street that is very close to our campus, and it has huge department stores. So everything from Macy's, Old Navy, Primark. So a lot of our students will actually go there during the first few weeks of classes and even during orientation. That's actually part of our orientation downtown tour. We'll take you shopping. And they buy a lot of their clothing when they arrive into Boston, just so you don't have to pack as much luggage. So once again, I recommend that you only pack the clothing you need for the first few months that you'll be here. I also recommend that you pack some room decorations. I remember when I first moved out of my parents' house, to living on campus. And it was really a transition because I was so used to living at home, being surrounded by things that were familiar, and then going to a room where it was not the furniture that I picked out and it was empty walls. So I do recommend that you pack some room decorations, whether it's pictures of family and friends, maybe some of your favorite stuffed animals that you might have, but anything to make the room feel like you and feel like home. So make sure to save some room for some personal items that you can add to your resident hall room. I also wanted to share that you do not, once again, you do not need to pack bedding. So Into Suffolk actually provides all of our on-campus students what we call a bedding pack. A bedding pack includes towels, face towel, hand towel, and body towel, bed sheets, a comforter, a pillow, a pillowcase, and a laundry hamper. All of those items will actually be in your room when you enter your on-campus room. So you don't have to pack any of those items in your suitcase. Save that room for other things. My final reminder about items to pack would be adapters for electronics. The US has its own outlets or plugs, and I know in many other countries, those outlets would not be compatible for the US. We had one student who flew in from Russia who forgot to pack an adapter, and he needed to find an adapter so quickly for his first day of class. And he was very stressed about that experience. So I encourage you, pack adapters in your luggage. And then when you come to Boston, you can always buy local electronics that fit with the US adapters here. My last reminders about what to pack include what to carry on the plane. So these are some very important documents that you will need as part of being a student in the US. And so make sure that you pack these items separately. I recommend putting them in a portfolio or a case that zips up and actually carry them onto the plane with you. We do not recommend that you check them into your luggage just because luggage can be delayed or lost. So these are the documents that you should have with you on the plane when you're flying into Boston. These documents include your original I-20, a valid passport or an F1 visa, your CVIS or I-91 fee payment. Oops, sorry, my lights just turned off. Evidence of funding for your tuition fees, living costs, including a sponsor letter if that's appropriate to your program. Those health forms and immunization documents I mentioned earlier, make sure you have an English translation for those documents. And this is really important. If you are taking medication that you need, make sure that you pack your medical prescriptions. So this is what your doctor has said that you need to take. And the reason that we recommend this, and especially so they're written in English, is that we will help you find a local doctor. This is something we'll be able to support you with during orientation. And we want to make sure that you don't have a gap in your medication. So bring your medical prescriptions with you. I recommend bringing anywhere from a 3 to 6 month supply, if you're able to as well, of those medications until you are able to identify a local Boston doctor. We also recommend that you pack your official transcripts or test scores, your insurance documents, if you have any, and of course, a laptop computer, which you'll need for your classes. All of this information, including what to carry on the plane and what to pack, can actually be found in our welcome guide. So our welcome guide is an online document. It is such a helpful resource because it has information from airport arrival survey that I talked about earlier, flying into Boston, what documents to bring, what orientation looks like, important contact phone numbers and emails, and more. The welcome guide, you have received a copy of it in your emails from Into Suffolk, but you can also access it to our Into Suffolk student website under the student guides section, and you can download it onto your laptop. So please make sure that you read through our welcome guide before you fly into Boston to get more helpful information as you prepare for your student journey. So that wraps up the presentation about living on campus. As always, please contact myself or the student experience team through email at into@suffolk.edu. We're happy to answer questions one-on-one, over Zoom, email, and we're also happy to speak with you and your family. And then, of course, please stay connected with us through social media, including LinkedIn and Instagram. Instagram is a really great way to know what's happening with student events, job opportunities, and orientation reminders. So please follow us on Instagram. We post every single day, and the posts are really fun too. So I'm going to stop the recording, and then we can have some time for questions and answers.